Not too long after I found out he had a wife and children.
Really? Defendant duped you and was living a double life.
Mr. Houston was a liar. He was a cheater. He was also a womanizer. And during the time after we had sex... Investigate. When my woman intuition hits, that's what I do. I investigate. I had told Mr. Houston that I was pregnant. He said that he would be there for me and my child. After 2 doctor's appointments, he stopped showing up. Found out via Facebook that he has a wife and children. And I have the evidence right here, Your Honor.
I'd like to see that, Jerome. And he has a wedding ring on his hand. Mm-hmm. And so you see the wedding band, mm-hmm. and then what do? And
then I call him immediately.
Houston?
Has he ever even brought up the fact that he had children? 5.
Oh! Mr. Houston, you never informed her of these very important details?
When I met her as a gentleman. Before anything, before my father, before my dad, before my liar, before my cheater, before any of these things at all. I'm a man first.
Well, you over here doing a Shakespearean play. Tell me.
This courtroom story unfolds under the authority of Judge Lauren Lake, where truth is not guided by emotion but by evidence, law, and the unyielding weight of consequences. From the moment the parties enter the court, it becomes clear that this is not just about a DNA test. It is about trust, betrayal, responsibility, and how quickly lives can shift when the truth finally has a voice. The case begins with a mother who has come to court seeking clarity and accountability. She believes that a man she was involved with is the biological father of her young child. Her claim is rooted not only in timelines, but in emotional promises that were made and later broken. She explains to the court how she believed she was in a genuine relationship, only to later discover that the man was living a double life. This moment introduces the central tension of the case. How deception outside the courtroom often becomes the driving force behind legal disputes inside it. Judge Lauren Lake carefully frames the issue for everyone present. This is the evidence stage in a divorce case. Like conflict, even though the parties are not married. The court is tasked with separating emotion from fact, regret from responsibility, and assumption from proof. The judge makes it clear that while feelings matter, they do not determine paternity. Only science and lawful procedure can do that. As testimony continues, the man accused of being the father denies responsibility. He insists that he is not the biological parent and claims the DNA test will clear his name. His defense introduces one of the most common patterns seen in DNA test cheating stories: doubt cast on exclusivity. He suggests that the mother may have been involved with other men, creating uncertainty about conception. This claim shifts the courtroom dynamic and raises the concept of adverse inference in Evidence Act, where credibility becomes just as important as biological proof. The courtroom atmosphere grows tense as past behavior is examined. Social media evidence is discussed, timelines are reconstructed, and contradictions begin to surface. Judge Lake emphasizes that this is not about moral judgment, but about legal responsibility. She reminds everyone that the relationship between law and justice is often tested in family court, where personal pain collides with structured legal standards. The mother describes how she felt abandoned during pregnancy and emotionally manipulated. She speaks about broken promises, missed appointments, and the deep sense of betrayal that followed her discovery of the man's existing family. Her testimony reflects why people regret taking DNA tests, not because the test itself is harmful, but because it exposes truths that can no longer be ignored. Judge Lake listens closely, guiding the testimony back to facts whenever emotions threaten to take over. When the accused man speaks again, his narrative reveals a pattern of avoidance. He frames his actions as misunderstandings rather than deliberate deception. Judge Lake challenges this framing, highlighting that accountability is not optional when a child's future is at stake. This moment echoes themes often discussed in the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where the pursuit of truth disrupts carefully maintained illusions. The court then hears from another crucial participant, the man's wife. Her presence shifts the emotional weight of the case dramatically. She explains how she discovered the affair and how trust in her marriage was eroded piece by piece. Her testimony introduces the broader impact of paternity disputes, showing how one hidden relationship can destabilize an entire family. Judge Lake addresses her with empathy, but remains focused on the legal matter at hand. This testimony reinforces the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where justice is not about punishment alone, but about clarity, fairness, and resolution. The court recognizes that while the DNA test will answer one question, it cannot undo emotional damage already done. Still, the law must proceed. When the DNA results are finally introduced, the courtroom holds its breath. This is the pivotal moment, the reason everyone is present. Judge Lauren Lake reads the findings with precision and authority. The result reveals that the accused man is not the biological father. This outcome instantly changes the direction of the case and underscores why DNA evidence is considered the most reliable tool in modern family law. The ruling brings relief to some and shock to others. The mother, while cleared of deception in some respects, is now faced with the reality of identifying the true father of her child. Judge Lake addresses her directly, emphasizing the importance of moving forward honestly for the sake of the child. This moment reflects lessons often shared in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where acceptance of truth becomes the first step toward healing. The judge also addresses the accused man, making it clear that while he is not legally responsible for the child, his actions still carry consequences. The court acknowledges that legal innocence does not erase moral responsibility for deception. This distinction highlights how the Game-Changing Attorney podcast often discusses the difference between winning a case and doing what is right. The episode does not end there. A second case follows, shifting the focus to a married couple facing a different kind of paternity dispute. Here, the husband questions whether he is the biological father of his wife's child, citing ongoing conflicts, trust issues, and the presence of past relationships. Judge Lake frames this case as a marriage at a crossroads, where the DNA test may determine not only paternity but the future of the relationship itself. The wife argues that her husband's doubts are a reflection of his own infidelity and insecurity. She explains that the marriage was rushed and that unresolved issues have grown into constant accusations. This situation reflects themes discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where unresolved conflict often manifests as distrust rather than communication. As evidence is presented, online behavior, messages, and credibility are examined. Judge Lake repeatedly redirects the parties away from blame and toward responsibility. She emphasizes that marriage requires effort, transparency, and mutual respect, principles often overlooked when conflict escalates. When the DNA results are revealed in this second case, the outcome is the opposite of the first. The husband is confirmed as the biological father. This revelation forces him to confront the reality of his doubts and their impact on his family. Judge Lake uses this moment to stress the importance of stepping up, particularly in matters involving Supreme Court child support principles, where parental obligation is both a legal and moral duty. The court's final guidance is firm but compassionate. Judge Lake makes it clear that while DNA tests provide answers, they also demand action. Truth, once revealed, cannot be ignored. Whether it leads to reconciliation or separation, it requires responsibility. Across both cases, the courtroom becomes a place where truth strips away excuses. The stories presented show why adoption stories, full episodes, and paternity cases resonate so deeply with audiences. They reveal how identity, responsibility, and justice intersect. Each ruling demonstrates that while the law may be impartial, its outcomes deeply affect human lives. This episode stands as a powerful example of how the courtroom functions as more than a legal space. It becomes a mirror, reflecting choices people make and the consequences that follow. Under Judge Lauren Lake's guidance, the court delivers not just verdicts, but lessons about honesty, accountability, and the irreversible power of truth. As the courtroom settles after the initial rulings, Judge Lauren Lake shifts the focus from verdicts to consequences. She reminds everyone present that a DNA test does not exist in isolation. It operates within a broader legal and moral framework where responsibility does not disappear simply because biology delivers an unexpected answer. This is where the courtroom becomes more than a place of decisions. It becomes a space where the relationship between law and justice is openly tested. Judge Lake addresses how easily trust can be destroyed when people attempt to control the truth rather than confront it. In many family court cases, the desire to avoid responsibility leads individuals to deny facts, delay proceedings, or distort reality. The judge explains that these actions often result in adverse inference in Evidence Act situations, where credibility suffers because cooperation was avoided. Silence, avoidance, and half-truths carry weight in court, even before DNA results are revealed. The discussion moves toward how DNA testing has transformed modern family law. Once, paternity disputes relied heavily on testimony, reputation, and circumstantial timelines. Today, science has become the final authority. Judge Lake explains that this shift has empowered courts to protect children more effectively, but it has also created emotional fallout. This is why so many people regret taking DNA tests, not because the science is wrong, but because the truth arrives without compassion, leaving individuals to deal with its impact. The courtroom reflects on the first case again, particularly the emotional aftermath. Although the man was proven not to be the biological father, his choices created damage that could not be reversed. Judge Lake emphasizes that avoiding legal responsibility does not erase emotional harm caused by dishonesty. This distinction mirrors discussions often found on the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where guests confront how truth reshapes identity, relationships, and future decisions. Attention then turns to the mother left without closure regarding her child's biological father. Judge Lake explains that while the court cannot force emotional healing, it can provide direction. She encourages responsible action, honesty moving forward, and a commitment to the child's well-being above personal conflict. The court recognizes that unresolved paternity can affect everything from emotional stability to future Supreme Court child support considerations, should another legal action arise. The judge also addresses the audience and viewers indirectly, explaining why cases like these matter beyond entertainment. Family court is not about drama, it is about structure. It exists to protect children, clarify responsibility, and ensure fairness when relationships fail. This perspective aligns closely with discussions from the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals explain how courtroom decisions often shape lives long after cameras stop rolling. As the episode progresses, Judge Lake revisits the second case involving the married couple. Now that paternity has been confirmed, the focus shifts entirely to accountability. The husband's denial is no longer legally justified, and the court examines his role as a father and partner. Judge Lake stresses that fatherhood begins with presence, not just biology. Providing emotional support, stability, and honesty is as important as financial contribution. The court examines the pattern of conflict within the marriage. Frequent separations, accusations, and outside influences have weakened trust. Judge Lake points out that repeated cycles of blame often indicate deeper issues that legal rulings alone cannot fix. This reflection connects with themes explored in the Divorce Course podcast, where experts discuss how unresolved resentment often manifests as denial and withdrawal rather than problem-solving. Judge Lake challenges both spouses to confront uncomfortable truths. The wife must decide whether she can rebuild trust, while the husband must decide whether he is willing to change behavior, not just words. The judge explains that courts can mandate child support and custody arrangements, but they cannot manufacture commitment. That responsibility lies entirely with the individuals involved. The discussion expands into the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not simply about who wins or loses a case. It is about restoring balance where possible and minimizing harm to those least able to protect themselves, especially children. Judge Lake explains that family court decisions prioritize stability, consistency, and accountability because children carry the long-term consequences of adult choices. The courtroom also addresses how modern relationships often blur boundaries. Social media, dating apps, and digital communication have introduced new forms of evidence into courtrooms. Messages, profiles, and online behavior now regularly appear during hearings. Judge Lake explains that while digital evidence can reveal truth, it can also mislead when taken out of context. This reinforces the importance of evaluating evidence carefully rather than emotionally. As testimony continues, the judge highlights the importance of honesty during the evidence stage in divorce case. Like disputes, attempts to manipulate facts often backfire, resulting in harsher legal outcomes and damaged credibility. The court reminds participants that cooperation often leads to better resolutions, even when the truth is difficult to accept. The emotional tone of the courtroom shifts again as Judge Lake speaks directly about recovery and accountability. She references how many individuals come to court carrying unresolved trauma from childhood, failed relationships, or abandonment. While the court cannot provide therapy, it can acknowledge these struggles. This moment echoes themes found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals begin healing only after confronting painful truths honestly. Judge Lake makes it clear that denial delays healing. Whether someone is facing confirmed paternity or disproven assumptions, growth begins with acceptance. She emphasizes that children deserve clarity, not confusion, and stability, not conflict. These principles guide every ruling, regardless of personal narratives presented in court. The court also touches on situations where adoption becomes a future consideration. Judge Lake explains that unresolved paternity disputes can complicate adoption processes, affecting timelines and legal eligibility. This is why Adoption Stories' full episodes often highlight the importance of resolving biological questions early, ensuring that children are placed in secure and legally sound environments. As the proceedings near conclusion, Judge Lake delivers a broader reflection on accountability. She explains that family court does not exist to shame or punish, but to establish responsibility where it belongs. The law does not demand perfection, it demands honesty and effort. When people choose avoidance, the court responds with structure. The episode demonstrates how quickly truth can dismantle carefully constructed narratives. Some individuals enter court confident they will be vindicated, only to confront unexpected outcomes. Others arrive fearing judgment and leave with clarity. This unpredictability is why DNA cases continue to resonate with audiences. They reveal the raw intersection of science, emotion, and law. Judge Lake concludes by reminding everyone that while the court can close cases, It cannot close wounds. Healing requires personal accountability beyond legal rulings. Whether rebuilding a marriage, co-parenting responsibly, or moving forward independently, the truth revealed in court becomes the foundation for all future decisions. This segment reinforces a central message. Truth is not negotiable. It does not bend to emotion, excuses, or fear. Once revealed, it demands response. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, that response is guided by law, grounded in evidence, and aimed toward justice, even when the outcome is not what anyone expected. As the courtroom reaches its final moments, Judge Lauren Lake brings the focus back to the deeper meaning of what has unfolded. Beyond the DNA envelopes, testimonies, and rulings, the court has exposed a pattern that repeats itself in family law cases every day. Truth delayed is truth multiplied in damage. The courtroom has not only determined biological facts, but has also revealed how denial, secrecy, and fear reshape lives long before a judge ever speaks. Judge Lake explains that DNA court cases often begin with certainty on both sides. One party believes the truth will finally force accountability, while the other believes the test will provide escape. What neither side often prepares for is the emotional aftermath. This is why so many people regret taking DNA tests, not because the science is flawed, but because the result removes all remaining space for denial. Once the truth is known, excuses collapse. The judge reflects on how both cases demonstrated different outcomes but carried similar lessons. In the first case, the DNA test severed legal responsibility but exposed moral failure. In the second, the DNA test confirmed responsibility and demanded maturity. Judge Lake emphasizes that DNA does not create responsibility, it only reveals it. What a person does with that revelation determines their character. The courtroom discussion highlights how these moments mirror themes explored in the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where guests often describe the shock of learning truths they were not emotionally prepared to face. In court, that shock is public, permanent, and legally binding. There is no rewind, no editing, and no private processing. The truth arrives all at once. Judge Lake reiterates the importance of the evidence stage in divorce case scenarios, even when the parties are not legally married. Family court operates on facts, timelines, and credibility. When individuals refuse to cooperate, evade testing, or offer inconsistent accounts, the court may draw conclusions under the adverse inference in Evidence Act principle. Silence and avoidance do not protect anyone. They often harm the very person trying to hide. The courtroom also addresses how infidelity frequently fuels paternity disputes. Many DNA test cheating stories begin not with doubt, but with betrayal. When trust is broken, suspicion replaces communication. Judge Lake explains that while cheating itself is not on trial, its consequences often are. Children become caught in conflicts they did not create, and the court's role is to untangle responsibility from resentment. Judge Lake speaks directly about children's rights. Every child deserves clarity about their identity, support, and future. The court prioritizes this above adult conflict. Whether a parent is biologically connected or not, the court evaluates who is willing and able to act in the child's best interest. This philosophy reflects long-standing Supreme Court child support principles, where the child's welfare outweighs personal grievances. The judge also discusses how modern family disputes increasingly reflect confusion between emotion and entitlement. Feeling hurt does not excuse avoiding responsibility. Feeling uncertain does not justify abandonment. Judge Lake stresses that accountability is not conditional, it is situational. When a child is involved, adults must rise above personal discomfort. The episode further explores how legal truth differs from emotional truth. Legal truth is definitive. You are the father or you are not. Emotional truth is complex. Trust may still be broken, relationships may still end, and families may still fracture. Judge Lake explains that courts resolve legal questions, but emotional healing requires effort beyond the courtroom. This distinction is often discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where attorneys note that winning a case does not always mean winning peace. Judge Lake addresses the concept of rebuilding after court. For those proven not to be biological parents, boundaries must be established to move forward without lingering conflict. For those confirmed as parents, the responsibility begins immediately, not someday, not when convenient. Parenting requires presence, consistency, and action. The courtroom discussion then turns to long-term consequences. Children raised amid unresolved paternity disputes often struggle with identity, trust, and security. Judge Lake emphasizes that early clarity prevents long-term harm. This is why courts push for resolution rather than delay. The law understands that uncertainty is damaging, especially for children. Judge Lake also reflects on cases where paternity disputes ultimately lead to alternative family paths. In some situations, adoption becomes a viable and loving option once biological questions are resolved. This is why adoption stories' full episodes often begin with unresolved paternity and end with stability only after the truth is acknowledged. Legal clarity creates space for emotional healing and permanent solutions. The courtroom atmosphere becomes reflective as Judge Lake speaks about justice itself. The concept of justice in jurisprudence is not about revenge or validation. It is about balance. Justice seeks to place responsibility where it belongs and protect those with the least power. In family court, that power imbalance almost always involves children. Judge Lake emphasizes that honesty early would prevent many cases from ever reaching court. Transparency in relationships, accountability during conflict, and maturity in separation could spare families years of pain. Yet when those qualities are absent, the court becomes the final authority. The judge also addresses viewers who may recognize themselves in these stories. Family court is not unique to dramatic cases. It reflects everyday struggles magnified by consequence. Judge Lake reminds everyone that while the court can mandate action, it cannot force integrity. That choice belongs to each individual. As the proceedings conclude, Judge Lake summarizes the lessons revealed. Truth cannot be negotiated. Evidence cannot be ignored. Children cannot wait. Whether someone walks away relieved or burdened by responsibility, the result is final. The courtroom does not offer comfort, it offers clarity. This episode stands as a reminder that the relationship between law and justice is most visible when emotions are highest. The law provides structure when emotions fail. Justice emerges when responsibility is accepted rather than resisted. Judge Lauren Lake closes the court with a final emphasis on forward movement. What matters now is not what was hidden, denied, or feared, but what happens next. Parents must decide whether to rise or retreat. Partners must decide whether to rebuild or release. Children must be protected regardless of adult mistakes. The courtroom doors close, but the consequences remain. DNA tests may end questions, but they begin obligations. Truth may hurt, but it also frees. In this courtroom, justice was not loud. It was precise, unavoidable, and permanent. And as the final gavel falls, one message remains clear. In matters of family, truth does not destroy lives. Avoiding it does.